The swollen river churned with spring meltwater, and Zara Prescott felt the wagon lurch sideways beneath her as the current grabbed hold of the wheels with terrifying strength. She was 8 months pregnant, alone except for the horses screaming in their traces, and the realization that she was about to die came with shocking clarity as the wagon tilted dangerously toward the rushing water. Her husband had been dead 3 weeks now, buried in a shallow grave 200 miles back after the fever took him, and she had kept moving west because there was nothing behind her but emptiness and creditors who would strip her bare. The year was 1867, and women in her condition did not survive river crossings gone wrong. The Snake River in Wyoming Territory was merciless this time of year, swollen with snowmelt from the mountains, and Zara had gambled that she could make the ford before sunset. She had gambled wrong. The wagon tipped further. Water poured over the sides, soaking through her skirts, shockingly cold. She screamed, gripping the seat, feeling the baby roll and kick inside her belly as if it too sensed the danger. The horses thrashed, pulling in opposite directions, and then the harness snapped with a crack like a gunshot. The animals broke free and swam for shore, leaving her alone in a wagon that was now more boat than vehicle, spinning slowly in the current as it carried her downstream. Zara tried to climb out, but her swollen belly made her clumsy. Her foot caught in her sodden skirts and she fell back hard onto the seat, gasping. The wagon struck something beneath the water, a rock or submerged log, and the impact threw her sideways. She caught herself on the edge just as the whole thing began to break apart, wood groaning and splitting as the river pulled at every joint and nail. She was going to drown. Her baby was going to drown. The thought came with a strange calmness now, a resignation. She closed her eyes and prayed, something she had not done since her wedding day, since she had believed God might actually listen. Then something massive crashed into the water beside her, and a hand like an iron vise clamped around her wrist. Zara's eyes flew open to see a man in the water next to her, a man bigger than anyone she had ever seen, with shoulders that seemed to span half the river. His hair was dark and long, plastered to his head and neck, and his face was all hard angles and determination as he pulled her toward him with one arm while the other battled the current. "I have you," he shouted over the roar of the water. His voice was deep, steady, completely unafraid. "Do not fight me." She could not have fought him if she tried. Her strength was gone. She let him pull her from the disintegrating wagon, felt his arm come around her middle, careful of her belly, and then he was swimming, powerful strokes that cut through the current with shocking efficiency. She could feel the muscles in his arm and chest working against her, could feel the sheer strength in his body as he towed her toward shore. The river fought him. It pulled at them, tried to drag them under, sent waves crashing over their heads. Zara choked on water, coughed, felt her lungs burning. But the man never faltered. He kept swimming, kept pulling her with him, and slowly, impossibly, they moved closer to the bank. Her foot struck bottom first. Solid ground, shallow water. The man hauled her up, half carrying her now, wading through the shallows until they reached the rocky shore. He set her down on dry land with surprising gentleness for someone who looked like he could wrestle bears, and immediately knelt beside her, his hands moving over her shoulders, her arms, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "The baby?" Zara could only stare at him, gasping for breath, water streaming from her hair and clothes. Now that they were on shore, she could see him properly. He was enormous, easily over 6 feet tall, with arms thick with muscle and a chest that strained against his soaked buckskin shirt. His face was weathered and sun-darkened, probably in his late 20s, with dark eyes that held an intensity that made her heart stutter. His hair hung past his shoulders, black as a raven's wing, and there was something almost wild about him, like he belonged to these mountains more than any town or settlement. She tried to speak, but her teeth were chattering too hard. The shock was setting in now, her whole body beginning to shake. He did not wait for an answer. He scooped her up in his arms like she weighed nothing, despite her pregnant bulk, and started walking. "I have a cabin a mile from here," he said. "We need to get you warm and dry before you catch your death." Zara wanted to protest, to tell him she could walk, but the truth was she could not. Her legs felt like water, her whole body trembling uncontrollably. She let her head rest against his shoulder and closed her eyes, feeling the steady rhythm of his stride, the solid strength of his arms beneath her. Whoever this man was, he had just saved her life and her baby's life, and she did not even know his name. "Thank you," she whispered through chattering teeth. She felt more than heard his response, a rumble in his chest. "Save your thanks until you are both safe." The walk took longer than a mile, or perhaps it only felt that way. Zara drifted in and out of awareness, exhausted and cold, her body wanting to shut down. But every time she started to slip away, she felt the man's arms tighten around her, heard his voice close to her ear, low and commanding, telling her to stay awake, to keep her eyes open. So she did, watching the landscape pass by in a blur of trees and rocks and darkening sky. Finally, a cabin emerged from the wilderness. It was small but solid-looking, built from thick logs with a stone chimney from which no smoke currently rose. He carried her inside and set her down in a chair near the cold fireplace, then immediately set about building a fire. His movements were quick and efficient, no wasted motion. Within minutes, flames were crackling in the hearth, spreading warmth into the single-room space. "We need to get you out of those wet clothes," he said, turning to face her. "You have hypothermia. Your lips are blue." Zara looked down at herself. Her dress was plastered to her body, heavy with water, and she was still shaking so hard her vision blurred. But the thought of undressing in front of this stranger made heat rise in her face despite her chill. He seemed to read her hesitation. "I am Paxton Emerson," he said. "Mountain man, trapper, and right now the only thing standing between you and pneumonia. I have seen pregnant women before. I have 4 sisters. Your modesty matters less than your life." His bluntness was oddly reassuring. Zara nodded, her fingers moving clumsily to the buttons of her dress. They were too cold, too stiff. She could not make them work. Paxton crossed to her and gently moved her hands aside. "Let me." He unbuttoned her dress with surprising dexterity for someone with such large, rough hands. His touch was impersonal, efficient, and he kept his eyes on his work rather than on her. He peeled the sodden fabric away from her shoulders, helped her stand to step out of it, then wrapped her immediately in a thick wool blanket from his bed. He stripped away her wet undergarments with the same clinical efficiency, always keeping the blanket between his eyes and her skin, always respectful. When she was finally wrapped tight in dry wool, he sat her back down close to the fire and disappeared into a corner of the cabin. He returned with another blanket and a tin cup filled with something that smelled sharp and alcoholic. "Whiskey," he said. "Drink it, small sips." Zara took the cup with trembling hands and drank. The whiskey burned going down but spread warmth through her chest. She took another sip, then another, feeling her shaking begin to subside slightly. Paxton draped the second blanket over her shoulders, then stepped back. "I need to get out of my own wet clothes. I will be behind that curtain. You keep drinking and stay by that fire." He disappeared behind a canvas curtain strung in one corner, and Zara heard the sounds of wet buckskin being peeled away, water dripping on the floor. She stared into the fire and took another sip of whiskey, her mind beginning to work again now that the immediate crisis had passed. She had almost died. Her baby had almost died. This stranger, this Paxton Emerson, had appeared from nowhere and saved them both. She owed him everything. He emerged from behind the curtain wearing dry buckskin pants and nothing else, and Zara's breath caught in her throat despite herself. His chest and arms were a landscape of muscle, his skin marked with old scars that spoke of a hard life in wild places. He was not just strong, he was powerful, built like men from mythology rather than real life. He crossed to the fire and hung his wet clothes on a drying rack, then pulled on a wool shirt that did little to diminish his imposing presence. "Your name," he said, not looking at her. "I should know who I pulled from the river." "Zara," she said. Her voice was stronger now, the shaking almost stopped. "Zara Prescott. I was traveling to Oregon Territory. My husband died 3 weeks ago. Fever. I thought I could make it on my own." Paxton turned to look at her then, his dark eyes assessing. "Oregon Territory is still 500 miles away. You are 8 months pregnant, traveling alone through the worst country in America. What were you thinking?" The question was blunt, almost harsh, but Zara heard the concern beneath it. "I was thinking I had no choice," she said quietly. "We had nothing left in Illinois. Debs, his family who wanted nothing to do with me. The baby and I would have starved. My brother settled in Oregon last year. He said there was land opportunity, so I sold everything we had, bought a wagon and supplies, and started west with my husband. When he died," she paused, swallowing hard. "When he died, I buried him and kept going. Because turning back meant certain death and going forward meant possible death. I chose possibility." Paxton was silent for a long moment, still watching her with those intense dark eyes. Finally, he nodded once. "That took courage. Foolish courage, but courage nonetheless." "You must think I am an idiot," Zara said, looking down at her hands clutching the whiskey cup. "I think you are a woman who drew a bad hand and played it the best you could," Paxton replied. He pulled a chair over and sat down facing her, near enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "How long until the baby comes?" "A month, maybe less. I was hoping to reach my brother before." She gestured vaguely at her swollen belly. "That was never going to happen. You were barely making 10 miles a day with that wagon, and the terrain only gets worse from here." He leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees. "You lost the wagon in the river. Even if we could salvage it, which we cannot, you lost your supplies. Your horses ran off. You have nothing." Zara felt tears prick at her eyes. She had known it, of course, but hearing it stated so baldly made it real. "Then what do I do?" Her voice cracked. "I cannot go forward. I cannot go back. I have no money, no supplies, nowhere to go. I am about to have a baby in the middle of the wilderness." "No," Paxton said firmly. "You are going to have a baby in my cabin where it is warm and safe, and then we will figure out what comes next." Zara looked up at him, startled. I cannot ask you to. You did not ask. I am offering. He stood and crossed to a cupboard, pulling down supplies. The nearest town is Yankton, South Dakota. 3 weeks travel from here. You cannot make that journey right now. So you will stay here until the baby comes and you are strong enough to travel. It is not a request or a debate. It is what makes sense. He began preparing food with the same efficient movements he had used for everything else, and Zara watched him, her mind reeling. This man, this stranger, was taking her in without question, offering her shelter and protection when she had nothing to give in return. It made no sense. People did not do things like this, not without expecting something. Why? She asked quietly. Why would you help me? You do not know me. I could be anyone. Paxton glanced over his shoulder at her. You are a woman alone, pregnant and nearly drowned. Those are the only things I need to know. He turned back to his cooking. Besides, I am not completely heartless. I had a mother once. She was pregnant with my youngest sister when my father died. People helped her. I figure this is me paying that debt forward. Zara felt tears spill over then, running hot down her cold cheeks. It was the kindness that broke her, the simple decency of it. She had been so alone for so long, carrying everything by herself, that having someone else shoulder even a fraction of the burden felt overwhelming. Paxton heard her crying and turned, concern crossing his face. Are you in pain? Is it the baby? No, Zara managed, wiping at her eyes. No, I am just grateful, more grateful than I can say. Something shifted in his expression, softening it slightly. Then rest, he said. You are safe here, both of you. She believed him. The next morning, Zara woke in Paxton's bed, alone and warm. He had given her his bed the night before after feeding her a simple meal of venison and cornbread, insisting she needed the rest more than he did. She had been too exhausted to argue, falling asleep almost before her head hit the pillow. Now she sat up slowly, her hand going automatically to her belly where the baby was doing morning gymnastics, and looked around the cabin in daylight. It was sparse but well maintained. One room with the bed in one corner, a table and chairs near the fire, shelves lined with supplies and tools. Furs and hides hung on the walls, along with various traps and weapons. Through the single window she could see dense forest and, in the distance, mountains still capped with snow. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that both intimidated and awed her. Paxton was outside. She could hear him moving around, the thunk of an axe splitting wood. Zara stood carefully, wrapping the blanket around herself. Her dress from yesterday hung by the fire, dry now but ruined, torn and stained beyond repair. She had nothing else to wear. The door opened and Paxton entered, carrying an armload of firewood. He saw her standing and nodded a greeting. You slept well, that is good. He stacked the wood by the hearth, then crossed to a trunk at the foot of the bed. I do not have women's clothing, but I have some things that might work temporarily. He pulled out a shirt and a pair of pants, both far too large for her, but clean. The shirt should fit over your belly if you leave it untucked, the pants. He eyed her pregnant form doubtfully. We will make them work. Roll up the legs, tie them with rope. It is not fashionable, but it is practical. Zara took the clothes gratefully. Thank you, I will make do. He left her to dress in privacy, stepping back outside. The clothes were absurdly large on her, the shirt hanging to her thighs, the pants requiring multiple knots and a rope belt to stay up even over her belly. But they were warm and dry, and that was all that mattered. She rolled up the cuffs as he had suggested and looked down at herself. She looked ridiculous, like a child playing dress-up in her father's clothes, but at least she was decent. When she stepped outside, Paxton was checking his trap lines, which apparently ran through the woods around his cabin. He glanced up as she emerged, and something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. You look like a mountain woman, he said. I look like I am drowning in fabric, Zara corrected, but she smiled slightly. It felt strange to smile. She had not done much of that lately. You should stay inside today, Paxton said, returning to his traps. Rest, recover. You went through an ordeal yesterday. I feel fine, Zara protested, truly. And I cannot just sit idle while you do everything. Let me help. I can cook, clean, something. Paxton straightened, looking at her with that assessing gaze. You are recovering from hypothermia and 8 months pregnant. You need rest, not work. I need to feel useful, Zara countered. I need to feel like less of a burden, please. He studied her for another moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but nothing strenuous. If you feel tired or unwell, you stop immediately. Understood? Understood. They fell into an unexpected rhythm over the following days. Paxton would rise early, check his trap lines, hunt, chop wood, and handle all the heavy physical labor that living in the wilderness required. Zara would cook, mend his clothes, tidy the cabin, and do what work she could manage around her growing belly and frequent need to rest. They spoke little at first, still strangers dancing around each other in the small space, but gradually conversation began to flow more naturally. Paxton told her about his life in the mountains. He had come west 7 years ago at 21. After his father died and the family farm in Ohio failed, his mother and sisters had moved in with relatives, but Paxton had wanted something different. He had become a trapper, learned to live off the land, and built his cabin here in Wyoming territory where the streams were full of beaver and nobody bothered him. He made his living selling furs in Yankton twice a year, and the rest of the time he lived alone, which he said suited him fine. Zara told him about her own life, though there was less to tell. She was 23, had grown up in Illinois, married William Prescott at 19 because he had seemed steady and reliable. He had been a clerk, dreaming of better things, and when her brother's letters from Oregon spoke of opportunities and land, William had become obsessed with the idea of going west. They had saved for 2 years, planning their journey, and then discovered she was pregnant just before they were set to leave. William had insisted they go anyway, convinced they could make it before the baby came. He had been wrong about that, wrong about his own health, wrong about nearly everything, and now he was dead and she was here, dependent on the kindness of a stranger who owed her nothing. He was not a bad man, Zara said one evening as she stirred a pot of stew over the fire. Just a dreamer. He saw what he wanted to see and ignored the rest. Paxton was cleaning his rifle, the movements practiced and precise. Dreamers get people killed out here. The West does not care about dreams, it only cares about what you can survive. That is harsh. That is honest. He looked up at her. I do not mean to speak ill of your husband, but he should not have brought you out here in your condition. It was reckless. Zara was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I know. I knew it even then, but I went along because I thought I had no choice. We had debts. Creditors were coming. William convinced me that staying meant debtor's prison for him and poverty for me, so I chose the gamble. She touched her belly. Now this baby will grow up without a father because of that choice. The baby will grow up alive because of you, Paxton said firmly. You kept going when most would have given up. You tried to cross that river to give your child a better life. That takes strength. His words warmed something in her chest that had been cold for weeks. Thank you, she said softly. He returned to cleaning his rifle, and Zara went back to stirring the stew, but something had shifted between them. The walls were coming down, slowly, carefully. That night, Zara woke to a sharp pain in her lower back. She lay still for a moment, breathing through it, telling herself it was nothing. False labor, perhaps, the baby shifting position. But then it came again, stronger, and she felt a tight band of pressure wrap around her belly. Not yet, she thought desperately. Please, not yet. It was too soon. She was still for weeks away from her due date, but her body was not listening to her desperation. Another contraction hit, and she gasped aloud before she could stop herself. Paxton was up instantly. He had been sleeping on the floor near the fire, wrapped in blankets, and he crossed to the bed in 3 long strides. What is wrong, I think? Zara gritted her teeth against another contraction. I think the baby is coming. She saw something flicker across his face, fear maybe, quickly controlled. Are you certain? Could it be false labor? I carried a baby before, Zara said through clenched teeth. Lost it at 4 months. I know what labor feels like. This is labor. Paxton ran a hand through his hair, thinking fast. All right, I have delivered animals before, calves, foals. A baby cannot be that different. A baby is very different, Zara gasped. Then you will have to tell me what to do. He began moving around the cabin, gathering supplies. Clean cloths, water, rope, his sharpest knife which he held in the fire to sterilize. His movements were quick but controlled. A man who had faced crises before and knew how to keep his head. How far apart are the pains? Close, too close. Another contraction hit and Zara cried out, unable to stop herself. Something is wrong. It is too early. The baby should not be coming yet. Babies come when they come, Paxton said, though she heard the tension in his voice. The river, the cold water, the shock to your system. That probably started this. But the baby has been growing for 8 months. That is enough. It will be all right. He sounded so certain that Zara almost believed him. The next hours were a blur of pain and effort. Labor was nothing like she had expected, nothing like the quiet, gentle experience women sometimes described. It was primal and violent, her body tearing itself apart to bring new life into the world. Paxton stayed with her through all of it, his presence steady and calming even when she screamed, even when she cursed him and God and everyone who had ever lived. He wiped her face with cool cloths, gave her water when she could drink it, held her hand when she needed something to grip. He checked her progress with surprising gentleness, talking her through each stage, telling her she was doing well, that she was strong, that it would be over soon. I can see the head, he said at one point, and his voice was filled with something like wonder. Dark hair, the baby has dark hair. One more push, Zara, one more. She pushed, putting everything she had left into it, and felt the baby slip free in a rush of fluid and relief. For one terrible moment, there was silence, no cry, no sound at all. Zara's heart stopped. Then Paxton did something, rubbed the baby's back or chest, and suddenly the cabin filled with the most beautiful sound in the world. A newborn's wail, thin and angry and absolutely perfect. A girl, Paxton said, his voice rough. You have a daughter. He placed the baby on Zara's chest, and she looked down at the tiny, wrinkled, perfect creature she had just brought into the world. The baby was small, smaller than she should have been, but she was breathing, crying, alive. Zara began to cry too, tears of exhaustion and relief and overwhelming love. Paxton cut and tied the cord with steady hands, then helped deliver the afterbirth and cleaned up the mess of birth with the same efficiency he brought to everything else. He brought warm water and clean cloths to wash both mother and baby, then wrapped the infant in soft furs to keep her warm. "She is small," he said quietly, looking down at the baby in Zara's arms. "Born too early. The next few days will be critical. She needs to stay warm, needs to eat often. You will need to watch her closely." "I will not let anything happen to her," Zara said fiercely. "I did not come this far to lose her now." Paxton looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them. "Understanding, maybe. Respect, I know you will not," he said, "and neither will I." The baby, whom Zara named Lily after her own mother, was indeed small and fragile. She struggled to nurse at first, her sucking weak and inefficient. Paxton carved a tiny spoon from wood and showed Zara how to feed the baby milk from a cup, drop by drop, when nursing did not provide enough. He kept the fire burning hot, keeping the cabin warm, and fashioned a sling so Zara could carry Lily against her chest, skin to skin, to help regulate the baby's temperature. Those first 3 days were terrifying. Lily was so small, so vulnerable, and every time she slept, Zara would wake in a panic, certain the baby had stopped breathing. But each time Lily was fine, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily. Slowly she began to strengthen, her nursing improved. Her cries became louder, more insistent. By the end of the first week, Paxton declared her a fighter. "She takes after her mother," he said. Watching Zara nurse the baby by the fire, Zara looked up at him, surprised. Paxton did not often offer compliments. "I do not feel like much of a fighter. I feel exhausted. Fighting is not about how you feel. It is about what you do despite how you feel." He poured coffee for both of them, his movements easy and domestic. Over the past week they had settled into an even closer rhythm, partners in keeping Lily alive and thriving. "You have been through hell in the past month. Lost your husband, nearly drowned, gave birth weeks early in a mountain cabin with only a trapper to help. And you are still here, still taking care of your daughter, still standing. That is fighting." His words made her chest tight with emotion. "I could not have done any of it without you," she said quietly. "You saved us, both of us. I owe you more than I can ever repay." Paxton was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "You do not owe me anything, Zara. This is what people should do for each other. Help when help is needed. No debts, no accounts to be settled. Just living right." She wanted to argue, but she saw the sincerity in his face and knew he meant it. This man, this rough mountain man who lived alone by choice, had a sense of honor and decency that surpassed most civilized men she had known. It made her heart ache in a way she did not fully understand. Spring deepened into early summer. The snow melted from all but the highest peaks, and the meadows around Paxton's cabin exploded with wildflowers. Lily grew stronger each day, filling out and becoming more alert, tracking faces with her dark eyes and occasionally offering what might have been smiles. Zara recovered from the birth, her strength returning. Though her body felt different now, softer and more worn, she and Paxton fell into a domestic routine that felt startlingly natural. He would hunt and trap and maintain the cabin. She would cook and clean and care for Lily. They would eat meals together, talking about small things and large ones, sharing stories and silences with equal comfort. Sometimes Paxton would hold Lily while Zara prepared food, the tiny baby looking impossibly small in his large, capable hands. He was surprisingly gentle with her, talking to her in a low rumble, and Lily seemed fascinated by him, staring up at his face with solemn attention. "She likes you," Zara observed one evening, watching them together. "All babies like me," Paxton said. "I have that effect on them. Adults find me intimidating, but babies think I am safe." "You are safe," Zara said without thinking, then felt heat rise in her face. But it was true. Despite his size and strength, despite the wildness about him, Paxton was the safest person she had ever known. He would never hurt her or Lily. She knew it in her bones. Paxton looked up from Lily, his dark eyes meeting hers, and something electric passed between them. The air in the cabin suddenly felt thicker, charged with something Zara could not name but definitely felt. Her heart beat faster. Paxton's gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes, and she saw something there that made her breath catch. Want, longing. Quickly controlled and pushed down, but there nonetheless. He looked away first, returning his attention to Lily. "You should start thinking about your next step," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "In a few weeks you and Lily will be strong enough to travel. I can take you to Yankton. From there you can send word to your brother in Oregon, arrange to meet him or have him send money for your passage." Zara felt something drop in her stomach. Of course, she could not stay here forever. This was Paxton's home, his life, and she was an intrusion into it. He had been kind beyond measure, but that kindness had limits. Eventually she would have to leave. The thought made her throat tight. "Yes," she said quietly. "Yes, of course. That makes sense." But it did not feel like it made sense. The thought of leaving this cabin, of leaving Paxton, felt wrong in a way she could not articulate. She told herself she was being foolish. She barely knew this man. The intimacy between them was circumstantial, born of necessity and proximity. It did not mean anything beyond that, except it did. She knew it did. The next weeks passed too quickly. Lily continued to thrive, becoming more alert and responsive. Zara regained her strength, able to do more around the cabin, even joining Paxton on short walks through the woods surrounding his home. He showed her which plants were edible, which were medicinal, how to read animal tracks and weather signs. He taught her about the mountains, sharing his knowledge freely, and Zara absorbed it all, hungry for understanding of this wild place. They were sitting by the fire one evening, Lily asleep in her makeshift cradle that Paxton had built, when Zara finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" "Living alone, I mean." Paxton was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "Sometimes," he admitted, "winter especially. The snow gets so deep you cannot travel for weeks at a time, and the silence becomes heavy, but mostly I prefer it. People complicate things. Out here, life is simple. Wake up, survive the day, sleep, no politics, no social games, no pretending to be something you are not. But no companionship either," Zara said softly. "No one to share things with." He glanced at her. "I have had companionship before. Spent time in towns, tried living with other people. It never worked out. I am too rough, too direct. I make civilized folks uncomfortable. You do not make me uncomfortable." The words hung in the air between them. Paxton's eyes locked with hers, and she saw his expression shift, something raw and vulnerable showing through his usually controlled exterior. "Zara," he said, his voice rough, "you should not say things like that." "Why not?" "It is true." She set down her coffee cup, her heart pounding. "You have been kinder to me than anyone in my entire life. You saved me, protected me, helped me bring my daughter into the world. You have shared your home, your food, your knowledge, and you have never asked for anything in return, never made me feel like a burden. How could you possibly make me uncomfortable?" "Because what I am starting to feel for you is not comfortable," Paxton said, bluntly, "and it is not appropriate. You are a widow, barely recovered from childbirth, with a newborn baby. You have been through hell. The last thing you need is me confusing things further." Zara's breath caught. "What you are starting to feel for me," she repeated. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "I should not have said that. Forget it." "I cannot forget it." Zara stood too, though more slowly. "Paxton, look at me." He turned, and the expression on his face made her heart ache. Conflict, desire, self-control, all warring with each other. "What do you want me to say?" he asked roughly. "That I think about you constantly? That I lie awake at night listening to you breathe and it is the best sound I have ever heard? That watching you with your daughter makes me want things I thought I had given up on?" "Yes," Zara whispered. "Say all of that, because I feel the same way." Paxton closed his eyes. "You do not know what you are saying. You are grateful, confused. Your emotions are all mixed up from everything you have been through. It is not real." "Do not tell me what I feel," Zara said, anger sparking now. "I know my own heart, Paxton, and I know that somewhere in the past months you stopped being the stranger who saved me and became the man I cannot imagine leaving. I know that when I think about going to Yankton, about never seeing you again, it feels like drowning all over again. I know that this here with you feels more like home than anywhere I have ever been." He opened his eyes and the naked longing in them stole her breath. "I am not an easy man, Zara. I live a hard life in a hard place. I have nothing to offer you but this cabin and whatever I can hunt or trap. No money, no comfort, no society. Your life here would be isolated and difficult." "My life everywhere has been difficult," Zara countered. "At least here it would be difficult with someone I care about. Someone who cares about me." "I do," Paxton said, the words bursting out of him. "I care about you more than I should, more than is wise, you and Lily both. The thought of you leaving, of this cabin being empty again, makes me feel like I am being carved out from the inside." Zara crossed to him, her heart in her throat. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. "Then ask me to stay," she whispered. "Ask me and I will." For a moment he just stared at her, his breathing harsh. Then he covered her hand with his own, his palm engulfing her fingers. "I have nothing to offer you but myself. That is more than enough." Something broke in him then. He pulled her close, one arm wrapping around her waist while his other hand cupped the back of her head, and he kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was fierce and desperate, full of all the wanting they had both been suppressing. Zara kissed him back with equal intensity, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Paxton rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said roughly. "Please stay, you and Lily both. Make this your home. Let me take care of you." "Yes," Zara whispered, "yes." From that night on, everything changed. They were no longer two strangers sharing space by necessity, but partners choosing each other deliberately. Paxton courted her in his own way, bringing her wildflowers from the meadow, carving toys for Lily, sharing his world with them fully. Zara made his cabin truly a home, adding small touches that softened its rough edges while respecting its essential character. They married in midsummer, a simple ceremony with just the three of them present. Paxton carved wedding rings from a piece of elk antler, smooth and beautiful, and they spoke their vows under the open sky with Lily bundled in Zara's arms. There was no preacher, no witnesses beyond the mountains and the wind, but it felt more sacred than any church ceremony Zara had ever attended. That night, after Lily was asleep, Paxton made love to Zara with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. He was so careful with her, aware of her body's recent trauma, putting her pleasure above his own. And when they finally lay together in the darkness, her head on his chest listening to his heartbeat, Zara felt a peace she had never known. This was where she was meant to be. With this man in this place building a life from scratch, the seasons turned. Summer faded into autumn and Paxton made his annual trip to Yankton to sell furs. This time Zara and Lily went with him. It was Zara's first time back in civilization in months, and the noise and bustle of even a small frontier town felt overwhelming after the quiet of the mountains. But it was also exciting. They bought supplies, ordered fabric so Zara could make proper clothes for herself and Lily, and sent a letter to Zara's brother in Oregon explaining that she had survived, remarried, and would not be continuing west. In town, Zara saw how people looked at Paxton. Some with fear, some with respect, most with wariness. He was too big, too wild-looking, too clearly not one of them. But he ignored the stares, conducting his business efficiently, and Zara felt a fierce pride in him. These townfolk with their nice clothes and proper manners had no idea what real strength looked like. Real strength was surviving in the wilderness, delivering a baby in a mountain cabin, choosing to help a stranger because it was the right thing to do. They stayed in Yankton 3 days, then headed back to the mountains with a pack horse loaded with supplies. Zara felt relief when they left town behind, when the trees closed around them and the noise faded. This was home now. These mountains, this wilderness, this man beside her. Winter came early and hard that year. Snow began falling in October and did not stop for weeks. Paxton had prepared well, laying in supplies, smoking meat, stacking firewood to the ceiling. The cabin became their entire world, a warm bubble of light and life surrounded by endless white. Zara cooked and sewed and cared for Lily, who was growing rapidly, already trying to sit up and grab at everything. Paxton maintained their home, kept them fed and warm, told stories on long evenings by the fire. They made love often, learning each other's bodies, finding joy and comfort in physical connection. Paxton was always conscious of Lily sleeping nearby, keeping quiet, but Zara could feel his passion in the grip of his hands, the intensity of his gaze. He worshipped her body like it was sacred, and she gave herself to him completely, trusting him in ways she had never trusted anyone. One night, deep in winter, Paxton woke to find Zara crying silently beside him. He pulled her close immediately, his voice rough with concern. "What is wrong? Are you hurt?" "No," Zara whispered. "I was just thinking about a year ago. I was in Illinois, trapped in a marriage that was more obligation than love, scared about the future. And now I am here with you, with Lily. I am happier than I ever thought possible." "It seems impossible, like a dream." "Not a dream," Paxton said firmly. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. "This is real. We are real, and I love you, Zara. I should have said it before now, but I am saying it now. I love you more than I knew I could love anything." "I love you too," Zara whispered. "So much it scares me sometimes." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and they made love with a tenderness that left them both shaking. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Zara felt something settle in her soul. This was her family now. This was her life. And she would not trade it for anything. Spring returned, and with it came life bursting forth from every corner of the mountains. Lily was crawling now, getting into everything, and Paxton built a fence around a section of the cabin so she could play safely outside while they worked. He was remarkably patient with her, letting her climb on him like he was a mountain, teaching her to be gentle with the animals they sometimes kept near the cabin. Zara discovered she was pregnant again in late spring. She told Paxton one evening after Lily was asleep, nervous about how he would react. They had not discussed having more children, but Paxton's face lit up with such genuine joy that her fears evaporated. "Another baby," he said wonderingly. "When?" "Winter, I think. February or March." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "We will need to expand the cabin," he said. "Add another room, make more space." They spent the summer and fall building, adding a second room to the cabin for the children to share eventually. Paxton did most of the heavy work, but Zara helped where she could, chinking logs and planning the layout. It felt good to build something together, to create a home that would hold their growing family. Lily turned one, a milestone they celebrated with a special meal and a carved wooden doll Paxton had made. She was walking now, toddling around the cabin and yard, jabbering in her own language. She looked like both of them somehow, with Zara's delicate features but Paxton's dark eyes and coloring. Zara sometimes thought about William, wondered what he would have thought of how his daughter was growing up. But she could not regret the path her life had taken. Lily was happy, healthy, loved. That was all that mattered. The second baby came in late February, during a blizzard that lasted 3 days. This birth was easier than Lily's, faster and less frightening. Paxton delivered another daughter, this one bigger and healthier than Lily had been, with a lusty cry that spoke of strength. They named her Rose, continuing Zara's tradition of flower names. With 2 children, life became busier but also richer. Paxton proved to be a devoted father, patient and playful in ways Zara had not expected. He taught Lily to track rabbits in the snow, showed her how to identify different bird calls. He carried Rose in a sling against his chest while he did his chores, talking to her in his low rumble. Watching him with their daughters made Zara's heart overflow with love. Years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. They had a son next, whom they named Peter, then another daughter, Grace. The cabin expanded again, growing to accommodate their family. Lily grew into a quiet, observant child who loved helping her father with the animals. Rose was bold and adventurous, always getting into trouble. Peter was gentle and thoughtful, and Grace was still a baby, but already showing signs of her mother's determination. Zara sometimes thought about the woman she had been when she first came to these mountains. That frightened, desperate widow seemed like a different person now. She had been shaped by this place and this man into someone stronger, more capable, more confident. She could track deer, deliver a baby animal, cure hides, predict weather from the clouds. She was no longer a city woman playing at wilderness living. She belonged here. Paxton had changed too, becoming less solitary, more open. His love for Zara and their children had softened him, given him something to build for rather than just survive. He smiled more, laughed at the children's antics, planned for the future in ways he never had when living alone. One evening when Lily was 7 and Grace was still nursing, Zara and Paxton sat outside watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. The children were inside, Lily helping Rose with her letters while Peter played with wooden blocks. It was a moment of rare quiet, and Zara leaned against her husband's solid shoulder, feeling his arm come around her automatically. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Giving up your solitary life for all this chaos?" Paxton snorted. "Every day. The noise alone is enough to drive a man mad." Zara elbowed him and he laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "I am joking," he said. "Zara, you and the children are the best thing that ever happened to me. This life we have built, this family, it is everything I never knew I wanted. I was surviving before you came, now I am living." "I feel the same way," Zara said softly. "Sometimes I think about that day in the river, how close I came to dying, how close Lily came to never being born. And then I think about everything that came after, everything we have now, and it seems like a miracle. Not a miracle, a choice." Paxton turned to look at her, his dark eyes serious. "We both chose this. You chose to keep fighting when it would have been easier to give up. I chose to jump in that river instead of staying safe on shore. And every day since we have kept choosing each other, kept choosing this life. That is not miracle, that is commitment." Zara reached up to touch his face. This man who had saved her in more ways than one. "I will keep choosing you," she whispered. "Every day for the rest of my life." "Good," Paxton said, and kissed her as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. More years passed. The children grew, each becoming their own person with unique dreams and personalities. Lily became an expert tracker and hunter, often accompanying her father on his trap lines. Rose wanted to see the world beyond the mountains and talked constantly about visiting cities. Peter loved building things, always constructing elaborate structures from wood and stone. Grace was still young but showed signs of inheriting her mother's practical nature. When Lily was 15, a trading party came through their area, and one of the young men, a decent fellow named Thomas, caught her eye. Paxton handled it with surprising grace, though Zara caught him cleaning his guns with excessive thoroughness the evening after Thomas asked permission to court Lily. "She is too young," Paxton grumbled. "She is the same age I was when I married William," Zara pointed out. "That was different." "How?" "Because she is my daughter." He set down the gun with more force than necessary. "I know what men think. I am a man." Zara crossed to him and wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his broad back. "You were also 15 once. Did you think bad things?" "That is not the point. She is sensible, Paxton. We raised her well, and Thomas seems like a good young man." "Too good looking," Paxton muttered, but he covered her arms with his own, holding her close. "I know you are right. I just never thought about them growing up, leaving." "They will not leave for a while yet," Zara assured him. "And even when they do, they will come back. We are their home." Lily and Thomas did eventually marry, settling on land not far from Paxton's cabin, starting their own family. Rose made good on her desire to see the world, spending several years in cities before returning to the mountains with stories and a husband from St. Louis who wanted to try frontier life. Peter built his own cabin with his father's help, creating beautiful furniture that traders sold in Yankton and beyond. Grace became a teacher, educating the growing number of children in the region. Paxton and Zara became grandparents, then grandparents several times over. Their cabin was often full of children and grandchildren, noise and laughter echoing off the walls. But there were also quiet times, evenings when it was just the two of them again, sitting by the fire as they had so many years ago. Zara's hair turned silver, and lines mapped themselves across her face, each one holding a memory. Paxton's hair grayed too, though he remained strong, his body still capable of the hard work mountain life required. They moved slower now, tired more easily, but their love had only deepened with the years. They knew each other completely, could communicate with a glance, still found joy and comfort in each other's arms. On their 20th anniversary, Paxton took Zara to the place where he had pulled her from the river 2 decades ago. The river still flowed swift and dangerous, but they stood safely on the shore, hand in hand, looking at the water that had nearly taken her life but had instead brought her to him. "I think about that day sometimes," Zara said quietly. "How terrified I was, how certain I was going to die." "I think about it too," Paxton said. "I was checking traps upstream when I heard the wagon breaking apart. I have never run so fast in my life. When I got to the river and saw you," he paused, swallowing hard, "I knew I had to reach you. There was no choice. If I had lost you then, I would have lost everything I did not even know I needed yet." Zara turned to face him fully, reaching up to cup his weathered face in her hands. "You saved me," she said. "2 lives that day, mine and Lily's, but you kept saving me every day after. You gave me a home, a family, a life worth living. You loved me when I felt unlovable. You taught me what real strength looks like. You are my everything, Paxton Emerson." His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she felt his lips press against her hair. "You saved me too," he said roughly. "I did not even know I was drowning until you showed me what living really meant. I love you, Zara. I will love you until the mountains crumble and the rivers run dry." They stood there together beside the river as the sun set behind the mountains they had called home for 20 years. Two people who had found each other in the most unlikely way, who had built something beautiful and lasting from disaster and desperation. Their love was not the stuff of fairy tales with grand gestures and easy romance. It was the love of shared work and shared dreams, of daily choices and lasting commitment. It was real and deep and permanent, forged in the wild heart of the American West. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, Paxton and Zara walked home together, their hands still clasped, their steps in perfect rhythm. Behind them the river flowed on, eternal and unchanging. But the two lives it had brought together had been changed forever, shaped into something stronger and more beautiful than either could have become alone. Their cabin glowed with warm light when they reached it, smoke curling from the chimney welcoming them home. They had built this life together, log by log, day by day, choice by choice. And it was good. It was very, very good. The years continued their steady march, bringing new joys and inevitable sorrows. Paxton's mother passed away, and though he had not seen her in many years, he grieved for the woman who had raised him to be honorable and strong. Zara's brother in Oregon finally came to visit, bringing his own large family, and the two siblings spent days reconnecting, sharing stories of the lives they had built in their separate corners of the West. Grandchildren multiplied. Lily had 5 children, each one showing the strength of both their parents. Rose's children were city smart but mountain tough, equally comfortable in St. Louis parlors and Wyoming forests. Peter's kids were artists like their father, seeing beauty in wood and stone. Grace's students became like her own children, and several of them stayed in the area, starting the foundations of what would eventually become a real community. The frontier changed around them. More settlers came west, drawn by promises of land and opportunity. Towns grew, sometimes bringing progress and sometimes bringing problems. Paxton and Zara watched it all from their mountain home, participating when needed but maintaining their independence. They had carved out their life and would not let others dictate how they lived it. When Paxton was 65, he took a fall while checking his trap lines. His leg broke badly, and for the first time Zara saw fear in his eyes, not fear of the injury itself, but fear of what it meant. He was not young anymore. His body, which had always been his most reliable tool, was failing him. Zara nursed him through his recovery with fierce determination. She set the bone herself, having learned field medicine over the years, and kept him in bed until it healed properly. Paxton was a terrible patient, grumbling and restless, but she brooked no arguments. Their children came to help, bringing food and supplies. Taking over the heavy work their father could not do, the leg healed, but Paxton walked with a slight limp afterward, a reminder of mortality. He adjusted, as he always had, learning to move differently to compensate. But something had shifted. He was more willing now to let their sons and sons-in-law handle the hardest work, more content to sit by the fire and carve toys for the grandchildren. Zara's own health remained good, though arthritis had settled into her hands, making fine work difficult. She taught the granddaughters to cook and sew, passing on the skills she had learned in a life that now seemed to belong to someone else. That frightened girl in a wagon seemed so distant, so unreal. But Zara knew she was still there, buried deep, the foundation on which everything else had been built. They celebrated their 30th anniversary surrounded by 3 generations of family. The cabin could not hold everyone, so tables were set up outside, groaning with food. Children ran wild through the trees while adults talked and laughed. Lily stood with her arm around her mother, both of them watching Paxton hold his youngest great-grandchild, a boy barely 3 months old. "You did good, Mama," Lily said quietly. "Building all this, we did good," Zara corrected. "Your father and I together, and now all of you continuing it." "I barely remember the river," Lily admitted. "Sometimes I think I do, but it is probably just the story you and Papa told so many times. But I remember the cabin, growing up here. I remember feeling safe always, knowing Papa would protect us and you would take care of us. That is the real gift you gave us, that security." Zara felt tears prick at her eyes. "That is all we ever wanted. For you children to have what we did not, stability and love and a place to belong. You gave us that and more," Lily said, hugging her mother close. As the celebration continued around them, Zara made her way to Paxton's side. He looked up as she approached, his dark eyes still sharp despite his age, and smiled. That smile still made her heart flutter even after 30 years. "Tired yet?" she asked, sitting beside him carefully. "Of all this noise? Absolutely." But his voice was warm, fond. "But it is good noise. The sound of what we built, 2 lives, Zara said softly, thinking back to that day in the river. "You carried 2 lives safely to shore that day. Look at what grew from those 2 lives, all these people, all this family. It started with you jumping in that river. It started with you having the courage to keep fighting," Paxton corrected. He shifted the sleeping baby to one arm and reached for Zara's hand with the other, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "I just happened to be there. You would have found a way to survive. You always do." "I am not so sure about that," Zara said. "But I am grateful I never had to find out. I am grateful for all of this, for you, for the life we built. If I could go back and tell that terrified woman in the wagon what was waiting for her on the shore, she would not believe it." "Good thing she did not need to know," Paxton said. "She just needed to survive long enough to find out." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their family, feeling the weight of years and the lightness of contentment. The sun was setting again as it had on so many evenings, painting the mountains in shades of gold and rose. But this time, surrounded by evidence of a life well lived and love well shared, the sunset felt less like an ending and more like a promise. Tomorrow the sun would rise again, and they would rise with it together. The seasons turned once more, bringing the family full circle through another year. Winter came harsh and long, spring returned with its usual explosive beauty. Summer blazed hot and brief, autumn painted the mountains in impossible colors. Paxton and Zara weathered it all as they always had, together. When Paxton was 70, he told Zara one morning that he wanted to spend the day at the river. Not the place where he had saved her, but a different spot, a peaceful stretch where they had taught the children to fish and where they had stolen quiet moments throughout the years. They walked there slowly, his limp more pronounced now, her hand steady on his arm. The river flowed calm here, not the wild torrent it had been in the spring of their meeting, but a gentle presence, constant and soothing. They sat on a flat rock at the water's edge, the same rock they had sat on countless times before, and watched the water flow past. "I have been thinking about mortality," Paxton said after a while, his voice contemplative rather than morbid. "About what comes next. I am not afraid of death. I have lived a good life, better than I ever expected. But I hate the thought of leaving you alone." Zara squeezed his hand. "You are not going anywhere yet, you stubborn man. You will probably outlive me just out of sheer determination." "Maybe," he said, but his smile was sad. "But when the time comes, whenever it comes, I want you to know that you were the best thing in my life. Meeting you, loving you, building our family together, those were the things that gave my life meaning. I was just existing before you. You made me truly alive." "Paxton," Zara said, tears sliding down her weathered cheeks. "You gave me the same gift. You saved me in that river, but you kept saving me every day after. You showed me what love really means. Not the romantic fairy tale I thought I wanted when I was young, but real love. Partnership, commitment, choosing each other even when it is hard, especially when it is hard." He pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her cheek. They stayed like that for a long time, 2 old people who had weathered decades together, who had built something lasting from desperate circumstances and impossible odds. "I would do it all again," Paxton said quietly. "Every hard winter, every struggle, every moment. For this, for you, for what we built together. I would do it all again without changing a thing." "So would I," Zara whispered. Without hesitation, they sat by the river until the sun began to set. then walked home together through the forest they knew as well as their own faces. The cabin welcomed them with its familiar warmth, and they prepared a simple meal, moving around each other with the ease of long practice. After eating, they sat by the fire as they always did, Paxton's arm around Zara's shoulders, her head resting on his chest. "Tell me a story," Zara said, something she had not asked in years but suddenly wanted desperately to hear his voice, to capture this moment and hold it forever. "What kind of story?" "Our story, from the beginning." So Paxton told her about the day he had been checking his trap lines and heard the sound of a wagon breaking apart in the swollen river. He told her about diving in without thinking, about pulling a pregnant woman from the churning water, about carrying 2 lives safely to shore. He told her about falling in love slowly and then all at once, about the moment he realized he could not let her go, about building a life together from scratch. Zara knew all of this already. She had lived it with him. But hearing it in his deep, steady voice made it new again, made her remember the fear and the hope, the desperation and the joy, made her remember how far they had come, how much they had overcome. When he finished, she looked up at him, memorizing every line in his face, every silver hair, every detail. "It is a good story," she said. "The best," Paxton agreed, "because it is true and because it is ours." They went to bed that night wrapped in each other's arms as they had for 3 decades. Zara fell asleep listening to Paxton's heartbeat, that steady rhythm that had been the soundtrack of her life for so long. She dreamed of rivers and mountains, of babies and grandchildren, of a man with dark eyes pulling her from drowning, and then spending a lifetime making sure she never went under again. Paxton did outlive Zara, though not by much. She passed peacefully in her sleep 2 years later, at 75, after a quiet day spent tending her garden and playing with the newest great-grandchild. She simply did not wake up the next morning, and Paxton found her still peaceful, a slight smile on her lips, as if she had dreamed something beautiful at the end. He buried her on a hill overlooking the valley they had called home, where she could see the mountains and hear the river. Their children stood with him, along with grandchildren and great-grandchildren, all of them mourning the loss of a woman who had been the heart of their family. Paxton lived only 6 months longer. He simply faded, as if without Zara he had lost the will to continue. The day before he died, he asked his children to take him to Zara's grave. They carried him up the hill, and he sat beside the marker he had carved for her, running his weathered hand over the letters of her name. 2 lives, he whispered, thinking back to that day in the river so long ago. "I carried 2 lives safely to shore, and they gave me everything." Everything. That night Paxton passed in his sleep, and his children buried him next to Zara, their graves side by side just as their lives had been. On his marker they carved the story in brief: jumped in the river, saved 2 lives, built a family, loved completely. The cabin remained in the family, passed down through the generations, carefully maintained as a reminder of where they had all come from. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would sit by the fire on winter evenings and tell the story of the river, of the mountain man who saved a pregnant woman and fell in love with her, of the family that grew from that one moment of courage and compassion. It became legend, the kind of story the West was built on, about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, about love that persevered through hardship, about building something lasting in a hard land. But for those who carried Paxton and Zara's blood, who had known them as parents and grandparents, who had felt their love and learned their lessons, it was more than legend. It was foundation, the bedrock on which all their lives were built. Years turned into decades, and the West continued to change. The frontier closed. Towns became cities. Wilderness was tamed. But in the mountains of Wyoming, in a valley where a river flowed constant and strong, the story lived on. And sometimes, when the light hit just right and the wind moved through the trees in a certain way, you could almost see them, a man and a woman walking hand in hand through the forest they loved, forever young, forever together, their love as eternal as the mountains themselves. 2 lives carried safely to shore. And from those 2 lives an entire world had bloomed, full of love and struggle, joy and sorrow, all the messy, beautiful reality of being human. It was not a fairy tale with a simple ending. It was better, it was real, and it was theirs.